he famously said that war is the continuation of policy by other means. Okay? Remember that phrase, continuation of policy by other means. War is decisive, one side wins, one side loses, at least in a policy sense. A firm decision is taken as the result, and there is no compromising. So here's my theory. Like war, the initiative process is an establishment of policy by extraordinary means outside of the legislative process. Initiatives are decisive. One side wins, one side loses. A firm direction is set. There is no compromising. However, there are follow-up lawsuits, of course. But the point here is that people turn to the initiative process to get past the fact that decisions are not being made, that we're not moving forward, and that the initiatives create policy, it's governance itself. It creates policy, it's governance sometimes by bludgeon, but it is it's where one side takes, if you will, territory from another side. So I think that's why it is turned to by interests in Sacramento, and those are usually the moneyed interests, because we started the question, Kevin, with money, and that's why it's very hard to make changes to it. Beyond that, the mythology behind the initiatives, which I happen to support, is that it's a tool for the people to use when the legislature doesn't act. And that sort of falls into this category, too, of decisive action. So it's very hard to change.
Dan, you've worked in presidential campaigns, of course, when you look at the politics at a national level. When you see propositions that come up in California, the old saying, I've heard it put 3 or 4 different ways, so, as goes California, so goes the nation and such. Is it true, or at what level is it true, that these interest groups want to start a wave, a national wave of changing policy across the country by just buying into a proposition in the state of California?
Boy, that's exactly right. It's a terrific point. It's one worth spending a minute or two on. Before I do, though, I want to apologize to all of you for coming in so late. I meant no disrespect to either you as an audience or to Pepperdine University. However, I had a rogue dentist who insisted on me spending about 2 hours longer in her chair this morning than I planned for. So I appreciate you letting me join late. To the question, though, there's a famous author by the name of Wallace Stegner, who once said, California is America, only more so. And for those of us Californians who are sufficiently full of ourselves, and I think that's all of us, we like that for all sorts of self-esteem related reasons. But it has the added advantage of being true. And you could look at ballot initiatives from the passage of Proposition 13, which Bill Fox played an instrumental role, that triggered a tax cut revolution that led to the election of Ronald Reagan as president 2 years later. The passage of Proposition 140, term limits in 1990, and now roughly 2/3 of the states in this country have some type of term limits on their elected officials. Invariably, whether it's taxes and term limits, whether it's stem cells and surfboards, things start in California and they tend to move eastward. And savvy policy advocates across the ideological spectrum recognize that and realize that a very good way of starting a nationwide movement is doing it in a state that not only provides a great deal of visibility, but a direct populist imprint, the way the initiative process does. A terrific question.
Steve, that calls into question, I think, even puts the spotlight more on the importance of the way that the initiatives are titled and summarized. You're running for state attorney general. Your thoughts on what that can mean for an initiative and the importance that it plays in the process from start to finish, since as attorney general you would be in that role?
Well, the way it works is the proponents of an initiative, they draft it up, they have their own proposed title, and oftentimes it's a title that is very, very attractive, sometimes with words that you're naturally drawn to, like reform or improvement. Now, also, if you can have your ballot initiative named after a woman, no matter Jessica's Law, Marcy's Law. We have Prop 5, one of the most dangerous proposals in the history of our state, known as the Nonviolent Offender Rehabilitation Act, NORA. We all love Aunt Nora. This would have destroyed criminal justice and public safety in California. Where did it come from? Drug Policy Alliance, George Soros, a few of his buddies back east, all billionaires. They wanted to put this concept out there, which is very close to part of his legalization of drugs philosophy, and see it would fly in California. The ultimate description given by the State Attorney General's office, I won't blame the individual, but the office, was such that you couldn't quite understand what it was doing. It was not clear to the average voter. It certainly didn't reflect what was going to be the consequence of Proposition 5. And I think that by not titling it properly and accurately, allowing those very trap words to be in there, we almost ended up with one of the most destructive initiatives ever in our history in terms of criminal justice initiatives. We've had a few bad ones and many good ones. So it is very important that the title accurately reflect what it is and the summary be understandable so the voter can, just that information, make a judgment. Because they're not going to read the 95,000 words appended to a particular group of initiatives. They're going to look at the title and summary if we're lucky. And hopefully they'll ignore the ads. Those are all false too. But nevertheless, it's an important role for the Attorney General. And I was making a list here of some very, very good initiatives and some very, very bad ones. Prop 5 is way up there as a bad one. Prop 36, with all the DAs and lawyers here know, is a complete failure. Another George Soros, Petri dish, California experiment. Prop 69, all-felon DNA database. One of the best laws ever written in this arena. There's 35 or 6 states that have all-felon DNA databases. We have the best in California. It was carefully written, and it was a result, not of anyone up here, but of legislative inaction that we have Prop 69. We filled a void in an important way. So at any rate, ballot title summary, getting back to that, critical to the process, and hopefully the public is as adequately informed as they can be under the circumstances, and they're not misled.
You know, sometimes when measures come out of the legislature writes its own title and summary because they want to step past the Attorney General and favor it one way or another. I was involved with the campaign that opposed the lowering of a 2/3 vote for certain bonds. And the first time it was on the ballot, the Attorney General had written that the vote would go down from a 2/3 vote to a majority. And it was defeated. People wanted to maintain that 2/3 vote. It came back. The next time it was on the ballot, instead of, this time at a 55% vote, instead of saying the vote would go from a 2/3 down to a 55%, it just said that these bonds would require a 55% vote. And people reading that title would say, oh, well, that's better than 50%, I'm going to vote for that. And it passed the second time. So the title and summary role of the Attorney General is crucial in the initial process.
And we also have the same process for municipalities, and something that Nooch, I think you're going to have to maybe deal with this election. We've got the marijuana legalization proposition that may well be a statewide proposition. There are also some local propositions and initiative measures that make their way onto the ballot. When you see a proposition like marijuana legalization, who knows what the details of it are going to be. When you're working on crafting an ordinance like dealing with the medical marijuana shops in Los Angeles, what is the process of your office in deciding what position to take and how to respond within the jurisdiction that you have?